Early evening settled over the luxury HOA district like a clean, expensive blanket. The streets were silent, polished, and controlled. Security cameras watched every angle. Guards stood at corners with stiff posture. Nothing here was allowed to look poor, broken, or out of place. Inside the HOA-owned restaurant, everything looked perfect. Soft music floated through the air. Crystal lights reflected on marble floors. Tables were spaced carefully so no one felt crowded. Men in suits and women in expensive dresses spoke in low voices, laughing softly, confident that this place belonged to them. Rules were everywhere, even if they were not written on the walls. Only HOA residents. Only approved guests. No disturbances. No embarrassment. Evan knew those rules better than anyone. He was in his mid-20s, thin, tired, and moving carefully between tables with a tray balanced in his hands. His uniform was clean but old, pressed again and again to hide how worn it really was. He worked long hours for low pay because jobs inside the HOA were hard to get and easy to lose. Evan did not live here. He lived just outside the HOA boundary, in a small apartment above a noisy street. He walked past the tall gates every day, past signs that reminded him he did not belong. HOA complaints followed him like shadows. Too slow, too quiet, too visible, too human. One mistake, and he would be gone. That night, Evan was already exhausted before his shift truly began. The manager had warned him twice. Smile more. Don't talk unless spoken to. Remember who the customers are. Evan nodded every time. He always did. The restaurant door opened, and a woman stepped inside. She was old. Very old. Her clothes were clean but simple. Her coat was thin. Her shoes were worn. Her hands shook as she held the door open, as if the weight of the room itself pressed against her. She paused just inside, unsure, eyes moving slowly across the space. The room noticed immediately. Conversations lowered. Forks paused mid-air. A few people stared openly. Others frowned. She did not look like she belonged in a place built to keep people like her out. The HOA manager leaned toward a server and whispered sharply. His eyes stayed locked on the old woman. Why is she here? The hostess hesitated. She asked for a table. She said she was hungry. The manager sighed in frustration. Seat her quickly. In the back. The old woman was guided to a small table near the wall, far from the center, far from attention. She sat slowly, carefully, as if every movement cost her something. Her hands trembled as she opened the menu. The letters seemed too small. Her eyes strained. Evan noticed her immediately. Not because she looked poor, but because she looked tired in a way he recognized. He watched from a distance as she tried to lift her spoon. It slipped slightly in her shaking fingers. She tried again. Her shoulders drooped. A quiet sigh escaped her lips. No one helped. No one offered. They pretended not to see. Evan felt something tighten in his chest. He remembered his grandmother, long gone now, struggling the same way at home, pretending she was fine so no one would feel uncomfortable. He remembered how she used to smile and say she was not hungry anymore. The manager's voice cut through his thoughts. Evan. Table 12. Move. Evan nodded, delivered a plate, then found himself walking toward the old woman's table without fully deciding to. He stopped beside her gently. Ma'am, he said softly. Is everything okay? She looked up at him with surprised eyes. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I don't mean to cause trouble. You're not, Evan replied. Her hands trembled again as she tried to lift her fork. It clinked quietly against the plate. Evan hesitated. He knew the rules. Staff were not allowed to sit. Not allowed to touch guests. Not allowed to draw attention. But he also knew something else. If he walked away now, no one else would help her. Would you like some assistance? He asked quietly. Her eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. Just a little, she whispered. Evan pulled a chair closer without sitting. Slowly, carefully, he helped her guide the spoon. He did not rush. He did not speak loudly. He made it feel normal. Some customers noticed. A woman at a nearby table frowned. Is that allowed? A man muttered, this isn't that kind of place. The HOA manager saw it too. He stormed toward Evan, face tight with anger. What are you doing? He hissed. Evan straightened. She needs help. This is a restaurant, not a charity, the manager snapped. You're breaking protocol. The old woman looked up in fear. Please don't trouble him, she said. I'll leave. No, Evan said quickly, his voice shaking but firm. She can stay. The manager's eyes narrowed. You are on thin ice, Evan. Evan nodded. I understand. The tension in the room thickened. Forks paused. Conversations stopped. Everyone watched now. The old woman ate slowly with Evan's quiet help. Every bite felt like a risk. Every second felt like a countdown. Then the front door opened again. This time, it was different. A tall man stepped inside, wearing a sharp dark suit. His presence changed the air immediately. Security followed behind him. Conversations stopped completely. Even the manager straightened his posture. People recognized him. He was known here. He was powerful. He owned buildings, businesses, influence. The man's eyes scanned the room calmly, until they landed on the old woman. She looked up, relief softening her face. My son is here, she said quietly. The man froze. The room held its breath. Evan felt his stomach drop. The manager's face went pale. The man walked forward slowly, eyes never leaving the table. He stopped beside his mother and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Did they treat you well? He asked softly. She hesitated, then looked at Evan. He did, she said, when no one else would. Silence filled the restaurant. The man turned toward Evan. And for the first time that night, Evan felt truly seen. The billionaire's eyes were calm, measuring, deep. Everything Evan thought he knew about his place in this world suddenly felt uncertain. And the room realized something all at once. This was no longer just a dinner. This was a reckoning. The soft music in the restaurant felt too loud now. Forks rested in mid-air. Conversations died without warning. Every eye in the room was fixed on the tall man standing beside the elderly woman. The presence he carried was heavy, the kind that made people straighten their backs without knowing why. The HOA manager recovered first. He rushed forward with a forced smile, his voice suddenly polite and nervous. Sir, welcome, he said. We didn't know you were coming tonight. The man did not look at him. He was still focused on his mother. She sat quietly, her hands resting on the table, her shoulders tired, her eyes soft. She looked smaller now, surrounded by wealth that had never been meant for her comfort. I was hungry, she said simply. And he helped me. Her finger pointed gently toward Evan. Evan felt the room tilt. He stood frozen, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. He wanted to step back, to disappear the way he had learned to do his whole life, but his legs refused to move. The manager cleared his throat. Sir, there seems to be some confusion. This employee violated restaurant policy. We were handling the situation. The man finally turned. His eyes were calm, but there was something sharp behind them. Handling it how? He asked. The manager laughed lightly. Well, we were about to ask the lady to leave. Our guests expect a certain standard. A quiet sound escaped the elderly woman's mouth. Not anger. Not shock. Hurt. Evan felt it like a punch to his chest. She was not disturbing anyone, Evan said before he could stop himself. His voice shook, but it carried. She just needed help. The manager's face tightened. Evan, this is not the time. The man raised one hand slowly. The room froze again. "Let him speak," he said. Evan swallowed hard. He felt every eye burn into him. He felt small, exposed. But he also felt something else rising in his chest. Truth. "She was struggling to eat," Evan continued quietly. "People stared. People complained. No one helped. So I did." The manager stepped closer, his voice low and threatening. "You are crossing a line." The man's voice cut through sharply. "No. You are." He turned fully toward the manager now. "You were going to remove my mother because she made people uncomfortable?" The manager's smile disappeared. "Sir, we didn't know who she was." The words hung in the air. The billionaire's jaw tightened. "That," he said slowly, "is the problem." A murmur spread across the room. Some customers looked away. Others shifted in their seats. Shame crept in quietly. The elderly woman reached for Evan's hand. Her grip was weak, but warm. "Don't be afraid," she whispered. Evan felt tears burn behind his eyes. He had never been told that before. Not here. Not anywhere. The manager tried again, desperate now. "Sir, this employee has a history of complaints. We were already considering disciplinary action." The billionaire turned back to Evan. "Is that true?" Evan nodded slowly. "Yes. I get complaints for being slow. Or quiet. Or just being here." Silence. The billionaire looked around the room, then back at the manager. "And you kept him because?" The manager hesitated. "He's useful." The word hit Evan harder than any insult. The billionaire exhaled slowly. "You treat people like tools and wonder why everything here feels empty." The elderly woman finally spoke louder now. "I raised my son with very little," she said. "We ate at places that welcomed us, not places that judged us." Her eyes scanned the room. "This place has forgotten what food is for." The manager's voice trembled. "Sir, please. Let's discuss this privately." The billionaire shook his head. "No. This lesson needs witnesses." He turned to Evan again. "What's your name?" "Evan," he replied softly. "Evan," the man repeated, tasting the name. "You did the right thing." Evan felt his knees weaken. No one had ever said that to him inside the HOA. The manager exploded. "This is unacceptable. Evan, you're done here." Gasps filled the room. Evan closed his eyes for a moment. He had known this would happen. Kindness always cost him something. He took off his apron slowly and placed it on the table. "I understand," he said quietly. The elderly woman started to cry. "Please don't punish him for helping me." The billionaire's eyes darkened. He looked at the apron, then at the manager, then at the room. "No," he said firmly. "You just punished yourself." The manager laughed nervously. "Sir." The billionaire straightened his jacket. "Because every word spoken here tonight will follow you." Security shifted uncomfortably. The room was no longer under control. And everyone felt it. Evan stood there, jobless, exposed, but something had changed. For the first time in his life, he had not been invisible. And the consequences had only just begun. No one moved to clap. No one spoke in support. No one defended him. That silence hurt more than shouting ever could. Evan stood there with empty hands, feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because the job that crushed him every day was gone. Heavier because everyone was watching him lose it. The HOA manager crossed his arms, trying to regain control. "Security," he said loudly, "please escort this employee out." 2 guards stepped forward. The elderly woman gasped softly. "No," she said, her voice shaking. "Please, he didn't do anything wrong." The guards hesitated. They looked toward the billionaire. He had not spoken yet. He was watching. watching the guards, watching the manager, watching the people who looked away. Evan took a step back, ready to leave. He did not want the old woman to see him dragged out. He did not want to make things worse for her. "I'll go," Evan said quietly. "It's okay." The words tasted bitter, but familiar. He had said them many times in his life. The elderly woman suddenly pushed her chair back and stood up. It took effort. Her knees shook. Her hands trembled. But she stood. "Sit," the billionaire said gently, reaching for her arm. She shook her head. "No," she replied. "I stood when no one else would. Now it's my turn." The room froze again. She looked at the manager first. "You wanted me to leave because I didn't look rich," she said softly. "Because my hands shake. Because I eat slowly." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "I did not choose to grow old. I did not choose to struggle. But I did choose to raise my son with kindness." Her eyes moved around the room. Tonight, kindness was treated like a crime. People shifted uncomfortably. One woman lowered her head. A man cleared his throat and stared at his plate. The manager scoffed. "Ma'am, with all due respect." "Respect?" the old woman repeated quietly. "You don't even know what it looks like." She turned to Evan. "You reminded me of my husband," she said, tears filling her eyes. "He used to help strangers the same way. He was never rich. But he was never cruel." Evan felt his chest tighten. He could not speak. The billionaire finally stepped forward. His voice was calm, but it carried across the room like a warning. "You fired him," he said to the manager. "Yes," the manager replied quickly. "To maintain standards." The billionaire nodded slowly. "Then explain something to me." The manager straightened. "Of course." "Which standard allows my mother to be humiliated?" the billionaire asked, while rewarding silence. The manager opened his mouth, then closed it. The billionaire continued, his tone still even. "You did not know who she was. That's true. But you knew who Evan was." The manager frowned. "An employee." "No," the billionaire corrected. "A human being." The words landed hard. The billionaire looked around the room. "Every one of you watched this happen," he said. "Some of you complained. Some of you stayed quiet. All of you benefited from rules that punish kindness." A woman spoke up nervously. "We didn't know." "That's the point," the billionaire said. "You didn't care to know." Evan felt dizzy. He had never seen powerful people spoken to like this. Never seen truth placed so plainly in front of wealth. The manager tried to laugh it off. "Sir, emotions are high. Let's not make this bigger than it is." The billionaire turned sharply. Too late. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "This restaurant," he said calmly, "operates on property I own." The manager's smile vanished. "Every complaint filed against Evan," the billionaire continued, "every warning, every threat of firing, I have read them." Evan's heart skipped. "You, what?" The billionaire looked at him. "I review things." Quietly. The manager's voice trembled. "Sir, this is unnecessary." The billionaire stepped closer. "What's unnecessary," he said softly, "is cruelty dressed as professionalism." Security stopped moving entirely now. The elderly woman sat back down slowly, exhausted but relieved. Evan moved to help her, forgetting everything else. His instinct kicked in. The billionaire watched that small moment. And something settled inside him. "This," he said, gesturing toward Evan, "is the standard." The manager shook his head in disbelief. "You're choosing him over this entire establishment?" The billionaire met his eyes. "I'm choosing humanity over your rules." The room felt different now. Not quiet. Exposed. Evan realized something terrifying and beautiful at the same time. He had lost his job. But he had started something far bigger. And the manager, standing there with nothing left to say, finally understood it too. This was no longer about a waiter. This was about everything the HOA tried to hide. The room did not belong to the HOA manager anymore. He could feel it. Just minutes ago, his voice controlled everything. His words decided who stayed and who left. But now, every breath he took felt heavy, watched, judged. The eyes of the guests were no longer on Evan. They were on him. And that terrified him. The billionaire stood calmly in the center of the restaurant, his presence steady, his face unreadable. He did not raise his voice. He did not shout. That made it worse. "You fired him," the billionaire repeated slowly, looking at the manager. "For helping my mother." The manager swallowed hard. "Sir, I was following HOA protocol." "Protocol," the billionaire echoed. "Show it to me." The manager hesitated. It's internal." The billionaire nodded. "So are your complaints. Your warnings. Your threats." A murmur spread across the room. Evan stood beside the elderly woman, his hands trembling as he helped her sip water. He felt small again, but now it was different. This time, people were watching him with something close to shame. The manager laughed nervously. "This is getting dramatic. Let's calm down." "No," the billionaire said firmly. "Let's be honest." He turned toward the guests. "How many of you complained about this man tonight?" No one spoke. "How many of you were uncomfortable?" he continued. A few hands lifted slowly. Some looked embarrassed. Some looked defensive. The billionaire nodded. "Good. At least you're honest." The manager stepped forward quickly. "Sir, they are our valued residents. Their comfort is our priority." The elderly woman looked up sharply. "And his comfort?" she asked softly, pointing at Evan. "Does that not matter?" The manager ignored her. "We run a business." The billionaire turned slowly. "No," he corrected. "You run people into the ground." The manager's face turned red. "With respect, sir, you don't see what we deal with daily." "I see exactly what you deal with," the billionaire replied. "You deal with fear. And you use it." Silence fell again. Evan's chest tightened. He remembered every warning. Every forced smile. Every night he went home afraid he would not have work tomorrow. The billionaire looked at Evan. "How many times were you warned?" Evan hesitated. "Too many," he said quietly. "Why didn't you leave?" the billionaire asked. Evan's voice broke. "Because I needed the job." The words hit the room harder than shouting. The billionaire nodded slowly. "That's the power you abuse." The manager snapped. "This is unfair. He broke rules." "What rule says compassion is wrong?" the billionaire asked. The manager opened his mouth, then closed it. The billionaire turned toward security. "Who reports to you?" The guards exchanged looks. One of them answered quietly, "HOA management." The billionaire nodded. "Not anymore." The manager's eyes widened. "Sir." "Effective immediately," the billionaire said calmly, "you are suspended." Gasps filled the restaurant. The manager laughed loudly, panicked. "You can't do that in front of everyone." "I can," the billionaire replied. "And I am." The manager's voice shook. "This place will fall apart without me." The billionaire leaned closer. "No. It will breathe." The manager looked around desperately. No one came to his defense. Not the guests. Not the staff. Not even security. For the first time, he felt what Evan had felt for years. Invisible. Replaceable. Powerless. Evan felt tears rise again. Not from sadness alone, but from relief so strong it hurt. The elderly woman reached for his hand and squeezed it gently. "You did good," she whispered. Evan nodded, unable to speak. The billionaire straightened and addressed the room. "This restaurant will close for the night," he announced. "Anyone who treated a worker like less than human should remember this moment." People stood slowly, quietly. No one argued. No one laughed. As guests left, many avoided Evan's eyes. Some nodded apologetically. One woman whispered, "I'm sorry." When the room finally emptied, Evan stood in the silence, unsure what to feel. The billionaire walked over to him. "You lost your job tonight," he said softly. Evan nodded. "Yes." The billionaire continued, "But you kept your dignity." Evan's shoulders shook as he finally let out a breath he had been holding for years. And somewhere deep inside the HOA system, something cracked. Not loudly, but permanently. The restaurant lights were turned off one by one. The soft music stopped. The tables were empty. The perfect place that once felt powerful now felt hollow. Evan stood alone near the wall, still wearing his uniform shirt but without the apron. The silence felt heavy. His hands shook slightly as he stared at the floor. Everything that had happened felt unreal, like a dream that moved too fast to understand. He had done the right thing. And still, he had lost everything. The elderly woman sat quietly at the table, her food untouched now. Her eyes followed Evan wherever he moved. She looked tired, not just from age, but from carrying years of quiet pain. "I'm sorry," Evan said softly, finally breaking the silence. "I ruined your dinner." She looked at him with surprise. "You didn't ruin anything," she replied gently. "You gave me dignity." Evan swallowed hard. No one had ever said that to him. The billionaire watched them from a distance. He did not interrupt. He let the moment breathe. He had learned long ago that real emotions should not be rushed. Evan slowly took off his uniform shirt and folded it carefully. The fabric felt heavier than it should. This shirt had paid his rent. It had fed him. It had also taken his pride, one shift at a time. He placed it on a chair. "I'll go now," he said quietly. The words felt final. The elderly woman struggled to stand. Evan rushed forward on instinct, supporting her gently. Her hand rested on his arm, light but trusting. "Stay," she said. "Just for a moment." Evan nodded, though his chest felt tight. She looked up at her son. "You see him?" she asked. The billionaire met her eyes. "I do." She smiled sadly. "This is the boy I told you about. The one who still looks at people." The billionaire felt something shift inside him. He walked toward Evan slowly. "Do you know what happens to people like you?" he asked quietly. Evan shook his head. "No, sir." "They get used," the billionaire said. "Then discarded. And then forgotten." Evan nodded. "That sounds about right." The honesty hurt more than anger. The billionaire took a deep breath. "My mother comes here every month," he said. "She dresses simply on purpose." Evan looked up, surprised. "She wants to see how people treat her when they think she has nothing," the billionaire continued. "Most fail." The elderly woman lowered her eyes. "I get tired of pretending," she whispered. Evan felt tears rise. "I wish I had known," he said. The billionaire shook his head. "If you knew, it wouldn't matter." Silence filled the room again. Evan finally spoke the fear he had been holding back. "I don't know what I'll do now." The billionaire studied him carefully. "What do you want to do?" Evan hesitated. No one had ever asked him that before. "I just want to work somewhere that doesn't make me feel small." The elderly woman reached for his hand. "You already worked there tonight." Evan's lips trembled. Security waited quietly near the door. They were no longer guarding power. They were witnessing change. The billionaire glanced at his watch. "I need to make some calls," he said. "Important ones." Evan nodded, unsure what that meant. Before leaving the room, the billionaire turned back. "Evan," he said calmly, "don't disappear." Evan frowned slightly. Sir. People like you always disappear when they think kindness failed, the billionaire said. This time, it didn't. He walked out with his mother, leaving Evan alone with his thoughts. Minutes passed. Then Evan's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Don't leave yet. Evan stared at the screen, heart racing. He looked around the empty restaurant. The lights were dim now. The place felt different. Smaller. Less threatening. For the first time, Evan did not feel ashamed of being alone. He felt chosen. Outside, black cars waited. Phones rang. Lawyers were being called. Complaints were being reviewed. The HOA system was quietly shaking, though it did not know it yet. And Evan, standing in the middle of a silent restaurant, understood something important. Kindness had cost him his job. But it had bought him something far more dangerous to the HOA. Attention. Evan stood alone in the dim restaurant long after everyone had left. The lights above him felt colder now. The walls that once echoed with soft laughter and rich voices were quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that made thoughts louder and doubts sharper. His phone still glowed in his hand. Don't leave yet. He did not know who sent it, but deep down, he knew. The billionaire. Evan slowly sat down at the empty table where the elderly woman had been sitting. The plate was still there. The spoon rested exactly where he had placed it. His chest tightened as memories rushed back. Her shaking hands. Her soft voice. The way she looked at him with trust when no one else did. He whispered to himself, "What did I just do?" For the first time since he was fired, fear hit him fully. No job. No income. Rent due soon. And now, attention he never asked for. Outside the restaurant, the HOA was not calm. Phones rang behind closed doors. The suspended manager was shouting somewhere in the building. Security officers were being questioned. Staff members whispered nervously, afraid they might be next. Inside the HOA board office, panic spread quietly. "This is bad," one board member said. "He saw everything." Another replied, "Worse." Others saw it too. The name Evan Brooks appeared on screens. His file was pulled up. Complaints. Warnings. Notes written without mercy. "Why did we keep him so long?" someone asked. "Because he never fought back," another answered. That answer no longer felt safe. Back in the restaurant, Evan finally stood and walked toward the door. His legs felt heavy, but his mind was racing. He stepped outside into the cool night air. A black car waited near the curb. The door opened slowly. The billionaire stepped out alone. No security. No anger. Just calm. "Thank you for waiting," he said softly. Evan nodded. "I wasn't sure what else to do." "That's honest," the billionaire replied. "Honest people usually feel lost after doing the right thing." They walked a few steps away from the building, far enough that no one could hear. "I need to ask you something," the billionaire said. "And I need the truth." Evan swallowed. "Okay." "Did anyone tell you to help my mother?" the billionaire asked. "No," Evan replied immediately. "I just saw her struggling." "Did you know who she was?" "No." "Did you expect anything in return?" Evan shook his head. "I expected to be fired." The billionaire nodded slowly. "Good. That means this is real." Evan frowned. "Real what?" "Character," the billionaire replied. He paused, then continued. "The HOA has a sickness. Rules without empathy. Power without responsibility. I have suspected it for years, but suspicion is not proof." Evan's heart beat faster. And now, the billionaire said, "I have a witness." Evan's stomach dropped. "Me?" "Yes," the billionaire replied. "But not the way you think." Evan felt fear rise again. "I don't want trouble. I just wanted to help." The billionaire looked at him closely. "Trouble already found you." What matters now is whether you let it break you or teach you. Inside the HOA building, alarms did not ring, but something worse happened. Emails leaked. Screenshots surfaced. Old complaints about staff abuse began circulating quietly among lawyers and journalists. Someone inside was scared enough to talk. The HOA system, built on silence, was cracking. Evan rubbed his hands together nervously. "What happens to me now?" The billionaire answered honestly. "They will try to scare you. They may try to blame you. They may try to offer you money to stay quiet." Evan's voice shook. "And you?" "I will watch," the billionaire said. "And I will wait." "That's it?" Evan asked. "That's everything," he replied. "Power reveals itself when it thinks no one is looking." Evan exhaled slowly. "I'm not strong like you." The billionaire smiled faintly. "Neither was I. Not at first." A phone buzzed. The billionaire glanced at it and nodded to himself. "They've already started." "What?" Evan asked. "They called an emergency HOA meeting," the billionaire replied. "They're afraid." Evan laughed softly, almost in disbelief. "Afraid of me?" "No," the billionaire said. "Afraid of what you represent." Evan looked back at the restaurant one last time. He felt sadness, yes, but also something else. Freedom. That night, Evan returned to his small apartment. The walls were thin. The street was loud. But for the first time, he slept deeply. Inside the HOA, no one slept at all. Because silence had stopped protecting them. And fear had begun to ask questions. Evan closed the door of his apartment slowly behind him. The lock clicked, and the sound felt final, like something had ended for good. The room was small, dim, and quiet. His uniform shirt lay folded on the chair where he had placed it earlier, as if it was waiting for him to pick it up again and go back to work. But there was no work to go back to. He sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. For the first time since the restaurant incident, his hands started shaking. Not in public. Not in front of power. But alone, where fear finally felt safe enough to show itself. "What did I do?" he whispered. He replayed the night again and again in his mind. The old woman's shaking hands. The manager's anger. The billionaire's calm eyes. The apron on the table. The word fired echoing like a stamp on his life. Kindness had always been dangerous for him. Now it felt deadly. Outside, cars passed, people laughed, life moved on like nothing had happened. Evan felt like he was standing still while the world ran ahead without him. His phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. His heart jumped. He didn't answer. Another message came. "You did the right thing. Don't disappear." Evan closed his eyes tightly. Disappear. That word hit harder than any threat. Because disappearing was what he had learned to do best. Stay quiet. Stay invisible. Don't cause trouble. Don't matter too much. Inside the HOA, the opposite was happening. No one was invisible anymore. Emergency meetings were called late into the night. Board members sat around long tables, faces pale, voices raised. Screens showed clips from the restaurant taken by guests. Messages flooded internal systems. Staff whispered in corners. "This is spreading," one board member said sharply. "We need to control the story," another replied. "Fire more people," someone suggested. Fear was making them sloppy. The suspended manager sat alone in his office, sweating, staring at his phone. He kept refreshing his email. No support. No calls back. Just silence. The kind of silence he used to give others. Back in his apartment, Evan stood up and paced the room. What if the billionaire was using him? What if this all turned on him? What if he lost everything for nothing? His chest tightened. He leaned against the wall, sliding down slowly until he was sitting on the floor. His breath came fast. Tears filled his eyes, and this time he didn't stop them. "I just wanted to help," he said quietly. A memory came back to him. His mother years ago, telling him, being kind is never wrong, even when it hurts. He had believed her then. Tonight, belief felt heavy. His phone rang. This time, it was not unknown. It was the billionaire. Evan hesitated, then answered. Evan, the voice said calmly. I know tonight was a lot. Evan swallowed. I think I ruined my life. No, the billionaire replied gently. You exposed a lie. Silence followed. They're panicking, the billionaire continued. Not because of me. Because of you. Evan frowned. I don't understand. You stood up without knowing who was watching, the billionaire said. That's the one thing systems built on fear can't survive. Evan sat quietly, listening. They are checking records right now, the billionaire added. Deleting files. Shifting blame. Making mistakes. What do you want from me? Evan finally asked. Nothing, the billionaire answered. Yet. That scared Evan more than anything. Then why call? He asked. So you don't disappear, the billionaire said. Because tomorrow will be harder than today. The call ended. Evan lay back on the floor, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow. Inside the HOA, tomorrow already felt dangerous. Emails were leaked to lawyers. Staff complaints resurfaced from years ago. A security guard quietly contacted someone outside the HOA. Another worker refused to delete files. Cracks spread fast when fear replaced control. Evan eventually stood up, wiped his face, and looked at his reflection in the mirror. He looked tired. Older. But there was something else there now. Resolve. I won't disappear, he said to himself. He didn't know what came next. He didn't know if he would win or lose. But he knew one thing clearly. The HOA had tried to crush him quietly. And instead, they had woken him up. Somewhere far away, in a building full of glass and power, the billionaire watched reports scroll across his screen and whispered one calm sentence. Now we wait. Evan woke up before his alarm. The room was quiet, but his chest felt heavy. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then everything rushed back at once. The restaurant. The apron. The billionaire. The call. The words don't disappear echoing in his head. He sat up slowly and rubbed his face. Today felt different. Outside, the city was already awake. Phones buzzed. Screens lit up. Somewhere far bigger than Evan's small apartment, a story was moving faster than anyone could stop it. Inside the HOA offices, panic had turned into chaos. A leaked video from the restaurant was everywhere. Evan helping the elderly woman. The manager shouting. The billionaire standing silent, watching. Clips were shared again and again, each time adding more anger to the comments. Disgusting behavior. This is how they treat workers. That waiter deserves respect. Board members argued behind closed doors. Lawyers were called. Statements were drafted and deleted. Someone suggested blaming Evan. Someone else warned that would make it worse. Fear was no longer quiet. Evan's phone started ringing. Not one call. Many. Unknown numbers. Messages. Missed calls. He stared at the screen, his hands shaking. He was not famous. He was not powerful. He was just a waiter who helped someone eat. And now the world was knocking on his door. A message finally stood out. I'm a reporter. I need to hear your side. Evan's stomach twisted. He remembered the billionaire's voice. Tomorrow will be harder than today. This was it. He did not answer right away. He took a shower. He changed into clean clothes. He sat down and breathed until his hands stopped shaking. Then he replied. They met in a small cafe far from the HOA. The reporter listened quietly. She did not interrupt. She did not push. Evan told the story simply. How the rules worked. How workers were treated. How fear was used. How kindness felt dangerous inside those walls. I didn't plan anything, Evan said softly. I just didn't look away. The article went live that afternoon. This time, it was not just a video. It was context. It was names. It was patterns. Former workers began to speak. Screenshots appeared. Old complaints surfaced. Stories that had been buried for years suddenly found air. Inside the HOA, the phones would not stop ringing. Residents demanded answers. Sponsors pulled back. Lawyers advised silence, but silence no longer worked. The suspended manager watched the news from his dark office, his face pale. His name was mentioned. His actions described. His words quoted. The power he once held felt very far away now. Evan returned home exhausted. He sat on his bed and stared at the wall. The adrenaline was gone. What remained was fear mixed with something else. Responsibility. A knock came at his door. His heart jumped. He opened it slowly. 2 former staff members stood there. A cleaner and a dishwasher from the restaurant. Their eyes were nervous, but hopeful. We saw the news, the woman said quietly. You said what we couldn't. Evan swallowed hard. I didn't mean to drag anyone into this. The man shook his head. You didn't. You opened the door. More people came in the following hours. Messages of support. Quiet thank yous. Stories shared in whispers. Evan felt overwhelmed. That night, his phone rang again. The Billionaire. They're investigating officially now, he said. This is no longer just public opinion. Evan closed his eyes. I'm scared. That means you still care, the Billionaire replied. That's good. I don't know how long I can do this, Evan admitted. You don't have to be strong forever, the Billionaire said gently. Just long enough for the truth to stand on its own. After the call, Evan sat alone in the dark. He thought about walking away. About disappearing. About letting others take over. But then he remembered the old woman's hand on his arm. Her quiet trust. The way she said, "Don't be afraid." The next morning, news vans parked near the HOA gates. Police cars followed. An official investigation was announced. Inside the HOA, people cried. Others shouted. Some finally told the truth. And Evan, standing in his small apartment, realized something powerful. He was no longer just reacting. He was part of something that could not be pushed back into silence. The truth had stepped into the light. And it was not leaving without a fight. The HOA did not wake up quietly that morning. News vans lined the street outside the tall gates. Cameras pointed inward. Reporters spoke into microphones with serious faces. The place that once controlled silence was now surrounded by noise it could not shut out. Evan watched everything on his phone from his small apartment. He sat on the edge of his bed, phone in his hands, heart pounding. Every update felt unreal. He saw the restaurant video replayed again. He saw interviews with former workers. He saw headlines using words he never imagined connected to his life. Investigation. Abuse. Discrimination. Power. Inside the HOA offices, panic turned into desperation. Lawyers rushed through hallways carrying files. Board members argued openly now, their voices sharp and afraid. Some tried to resign. Others tried to blame each other. Emails were deleted too late. Records were requested. Servers were sealed. The system that crushed people quietly was now loud, messy, and exposed. By noon, the first official announcement came. An internal investigation has begun. Evan felt his chest tighten. This was real now. He wasn't just a story anymore. He was a witness. His phone rang. It was the reporter again. They're questioning management, she said. And they want to speak with you. Evan closed his eyes. Fear washed over him, heavy and cold. He thought about saying no. about hiding, about letting someone else carry the weight. Then he remembered the old woman's voice. "Don't be afraid. I'll come," he said quietly. At the investigation office, Evan sat in a small room across from two officials. The room was plain. No luxury. No pressure. Just questions and listening. He told the truth slowly. About the rules. About the warnings. About the way fear controlled everything. About how helping one woman almost destroyed his life. His voice shook. His hands trembled. But he did not stop. When he finished, one of the officials looked at him and said, "Thank you for your courage." Evan nodded, unable to speak. Outside, the fallout continued. That evening, the news broke. The HOA manager has been officially terminated pending investigation. Evan sat down hard on his couch when he read it. His legs felt weak. His eyes filled with tears. Not from joy. From release. Years of silent pressure had finally cracked. But the emotional weight hit him harder than he expected. Once the fight slowed, his body remembered everything. The exhaustion. The fear. The nights he went home wondering if he would still have work tomorrow. The shame of feeling small. He curled forward and cried. Not quietly this time. Not politely. He cried for the boy who learned early that kindness was dangerous. He cried for the man who almost believed he deserved to be treated badly. He cried for every worker who stayed silent because they had no choice. A knock came at his door. His heart jumped again. When he opened it, he froze. The elderly woman stood there, holding her purse tightly, her son beside her. Evan's breath caught. "I wanted to see you," she said softly. He stepped aside immediately. "Please, come in." She sat slowly, carefully. Evan knelt in front of her without thinking, the same way he had in the restaurant. "You changed nothing by being powerful," she said gently. "You changed everything by being kind." Evan's tears fell again. "I was scared," he admitted. She smiled. "So was I. And yet we both stood." The billionaire watched quietly, then spoke. "They are removing more people tonight. This isn't over, but it won't go backward." Evan looked up. "I didn't plan to do any of this." "I know," the billionaire replied. "That's why it worked." Later that night, as news channels showed images of the HOA gates under investigation, Evan sat alone again, but he did not feel lonely. For the first time in his life, he felt lighter. The walls that once trapped him were breaking. Not all at once, but enough to let light in. And Evan understood something powerful. The HOA thought rules made them strong. But it was truth that finally brought them down. After the arrests and investigations, the world did not suddenly become calm. But it slowed down. The HOA gates stayed closed for days. Reporters came less often. Cameras moved away. The loud anger turned into serious questions. Inside offices, files were reviewed, rules rewritten, and names removed from power quietly. Evan felt the change in a different way. He woke up one morning and realized his phone was silent. No threats. No unknown numbers. No fear pressing on his chest the moment he opened his eyes. He sat up slowly and looked around his small apartment. The walls were still thin. The furniture was still old. Nothing had magically changed. Except him. He breathed in deeply, then out. For the first time in a long time, he did not feel like he needed to rush. He did not feel like he needed to hide. Later that day, Evan walked outside and felt something strange. People looked at him. Not with judgment. Not with annoyance. With respect. A woman at the grocery store smiled at him and said, "You're the waiter, right?" A man nodded and said, "What you did mattered." Evan nodded back, unsure how to respond. He was not used to being seen this way. Praise felt heavier than insults sometimes. That afternoon, Evan received an official letter. Not from the HOA. From the city. It asked him to attend a formal hearing as a witness, to speak about worker treatment, intimidation, and abuse of power. His hands shook as he read it. The responsibility felt huge. That evening, Evan met the elderly woman and her son again. They sat together in a small cafe far from the HOA. No cameras. No reporters. Just people. The elderly woman looked tired, but peaceful. She ate slowly, carefully, and no one stared. "You look lighter," she said gently. Evan smiled faintly. "I feel different." The billionaire watched them quietly, then spoke. "They are restructuring everything," he said. "Managers removed. Policies rewritten. Workers protected." Evan nodded. "I didn't think it would go this far." "It didn't," the elderly woman replied softly. "You did." Evan looked down, emotion tightening his throat. "I almost walked away," he admitted. "I almost disappeared." She reached for his hand. "And yet, you stayed." At the hearing, Evan spoke plainly. He did not exaggerate. He did not attack. He did not seek revenge. He told the truth. About how fear controlled workers. About how kindness was punished. About how silence protected cruelty. His voice shook at times, but he did not stop. When he finished, the room stayed quiet for a long moment. Then someone stood. Then another. Applause filled the hall. Evan sat down, his hands trembling, his heart full. He did not feel like a hero. He felt tired. Honest. Free. That night, back in his apartment, Evan found an envelope on his table. He recognized the handwriting immediately. Inside was a short note. "The hardest part is done. Now comes living." There was another paper beneath it. Not money. Not a check. An offer. A position helping oversee worker standards across HOA-owned businesses. Modest pay. Real authority. A chance to make sure no one else was treated the way he had been. Evan stared at the paper for a long time. Tears fell quietly onto it. Not from sadness. From relief. From knowing his pain had not been wasted. He placed the letter beside his bed and turned off the light. Tomorrow would still be hard. But it would be honest. And for Evan, that was everything. The city slowly returned to its normal rhythm. Traffic moved again. Restaurants filled again. People laughed again. But inside the HOA, nothing felt the same anymore. The rules were still there, written on boards and papers, but they no longer carried fear. They carried reminders. Evan walked past the restaurant one quiet morning. The glass doors were open. New signs hung inside. Respect every guest. Respect every worker. He stopped for a moment and looked through the window. The tables were set. Staff moved calmly. No shouting. No fear in their eyes. For years, he had walked into that place with his shoulders tight and his heart heavy. Now, he stood outside with his back straight. He was not going in as a waiter. He was going in as someone who mattered. Inside, the staff greeted him with small smiles. Some nodded. Some whispered thank you. Evan nodded back, still getting used to being seen this way. He walked slowly, letting the feeling settle. At a corner table, the elderly woman sat again. This time, she was not alone. She sat comfortably, her coat folded neatly beside her, her hands steady as she lifted her spoon. No one stared. No one complained. She ate at her own pace, peacefully. Evan's chest tightened. He walked toward her instinctively, then stopped himself. She did not need help today. She looked up and smiled. "You see," she said softly. "This is how it should have been." Evan smiled back, his eyes wet. "Yes. This is how it should be." Her son joined them moments later. He looked calmer now. Lighter. The weight he had carried for years was finally shared. "It's finished," the billionaire said quietly. "The last board member resigned this morning." Evan took a deep breath. I still don't feel like this was me. That's because it wasn't about you, the elderly woman replied gently. It was about a choice. They sat in silence for a moment, letting the truth sink in. Later that day, Evan walked through the HOA grounds. Workers passed him. Some greeted him. Some stopped to talk. For the first time, no one whispered when he walked by. No one looked down on him. He remembered all the days he had kept his head low. All the times he stayed quiet to survive. All the nights he told himself kindness was dangerous. He stopped near a bench and sat down. For the first time in his life, he rested without guilt. That evening, Evan took the subway home. The same line. The same metal sound. The same tired faces. The train stopped, and an elderly man stepped in. His hands shook slightly as he held the pole. People avoided his eyes. The moment felt familiar. Evan stood up immediately. Please, he said. The man looked surprised, then grateful. He sat down slowly. Thank you, he whispered. Evan held the pole, steady and calm. He realized something important in that moment. He did not stand up because he was brave. He stood up because he remembered who he was. When Evan reached his stop, his phone vibrated. A message from the billionaire. Proud of you. Evan smiled softly. Back in his small apartment, Evan placed the last envelope on his table. The one that started everything. He looked around the room again. It was still small. Still simple. But it felt warm now. He lay down on his bed, tired in a good way. Somewhere in the city, workers slept without fear. Somewhere else, rules were rewritten with care. And somewhere deep inside Evan, a quiet truth stayed strong. He did not change the world because he was powerful. He changed it because, when it mattered most, he chose kindness over comfort. All of it began with one simple act. Helping someone eat.